What if the lonely, forgotten soul you rescued was secretly waiting to rescue you right back? What if that quiet creature huddled in the corner of a cage wasn't just looking for a home, but was holding the key to a past you never knew existed? A past that would change your life and his forever for Clara. Living in the quiet, picturesque town of Silver Creek, Colorado, loneliness wasn't a loud, screaming void. It was a gentle hum beneath the surface of her life, the kind of quiet that settles in when you're new to a town and your only real coworker is your laptop. She was a freelance graphic designer, a master of creating vibrant, connected worlds on a screen, but her own world felt like it was rendered in grayscale. The silence of her small rental house was becoming heavy. So she decided to do what so many of us do when faced with that feeling. She decided to get a dog. Her trip to the Second Chance Sanctuary was filled with the usual chaos of hope. A symphony of yaps and whines from puppies tumbling over each other. A golden retriever mix with sad, hopeful eyes. A boisterous husky who promised a life of adventure. And Clara looked at them all. She really did. She saw the perfect dogs, the easy choices. But her eyes kept drifting to the back corner of the room to a kennel that was completely silent. Inside, a scruffy terrier mix was curled into a tight ball, trying to make himself invisible. His fur was a wiry mess of brown and black, and he didn't look up, didn't wag his tail, didn't even acknowledge her presence. A volunteer walked over a kind woman with a tired smile. "Oh, that's Leo," she said, her voice soft with a hint of pity. "He's been here a while. A bit of a difficult case. Very shy, very shut down." Difficult, shy, shut down. The words should have been a warning, but for Clara, they felt like an introduction. We have this strange instinct, don't we? To be drawn to the broken ones. And it's not always about pity. Sometimes deep down, it's a quiet subconscious recognition of a feeling we know all too well. Looking at Leo, Clara didn't just see a dog. She saw a reflection of her own quiet loneliness. In that moment, the choice was made. All the perfect, easy dogs faded away. There was only Leo. The first few days were awkward. Leo didn't seem to know he had been rescued. He explored the house with the silent, methodical precision of a bomb squad technician, sniffing every corner, mapping every exit. He didn't play. He didn't chew on the new toys Clara bought. He just watched. He would sit for hours, his gaze fixed on Clara while she worked his posture, not relaxed, but observant. It was unsettling. She tried to teach him things. Sit. Stay. He'd just stare back with his intelligent dark eyes offering no response. Yet the strangest things would happen. One afternoon, struggling with a massive design file, she muttered to herself, "Ugh, I need my tablet from the bedroom." And before she could even stand up, Leo was trotting back into the room, her tablet gently held in his mouth, placing it at her feet. She stared, dumbfounded. It happened again when she misplaced her keys. After 5 minutes of frantic searching, Leo emerged from the kitchen keys in his mouth and dropped them into her open hand. It was unnerving. This wasn't a dog learning tricks. This was a creature that seemed to understand intent. But all of that was just a prelude. The moment that shattered Clara's reality came on a rainy Tuesday evening. She was working late, lost in a project, a podcast playing in her headphones. As a midnight snack, she'd put a couple of slices of bread in her old finicky toaster and forgotten about them. The smell of burning toast was completely masked by the coffee brewing beside it. The first wisp of smoke, thin and gray, curled up towards the ceiling unnoticed. And then, chaos. Leo erupted from his spot on the rug. It wasn't a normal bark. It was a frantic, high-pitched, and incredibly specific series of yelps. He wasn't just making noise. He was communicating something urgent. He launched himself at her not aggressively, but with a focused intensity, nudging her hand off the mouse, pushing his head against her legs, driving her away from the desk. "Leo, stop! What is wrong with you?" she yelled, pulling off her headphones in frustration. That's when she heard it. A low electric crackle from the kitchen counter. She saw the smoke now, thick and black, pouring from the toaster. As Leo continued to herd her towards the back door, barking relentlessly, the toaster gave a final violent pop. A shower of sparks erupted, and a small, hungry flame licked up the wall. Seconds. He had given her mere seconds of warning before the smoke alarm shrieked to life. Standing outside in the damp night air, listening to the fire alarm scream, Clara stared at her house, her heart pounding. Then she looked down at the scruffy dog, sitting calmly by her side, his work apparently done. The fear of the fire was quickly replaced by a chilling, profound sense of awe. That wasn't the panicked reaction of a scared animal. It was a trained, methodical, procedural alert. He hadn't just saved her from a fire, he had evacuated her. In that moment, everything changed. The lesson wasn't just some feel-good mantra about adopting a pet. It was a stark reminder that if we dare to look past the surface, past the labels like difficult or broken, we might find something extraordinary hidden in the most ordinary package. As Clara knelt down and wrapped her arms around her quiet hero, the question burning in her mind was no longer, "How will I ever take care of this dog?" It was a much more frightening, much more fascinating question. Who are you, Leo? And that question would lead her down a path of discovery, danger, and heroism that she could never have imagined. She thought she was rescuing a dog, but she was about to find out that she had brought home a ghost, a hero with a past he couldn't speak of, and a story that was crying out to be told. After the fire, Clara's home was no longer just a house with a dog in it. It was a house with a mystery. Every little thing Leo did became a clue. She started watching him with the focused intensity of a detective, and the more she watched, the less sense it made. He was a living, breathing paradox. He would ignore a simple command like fetch, as if he didn't understand the language, but if she dropped a pen, he would retrieve it with the gentle precision of a surgeon. The patterns she started noticing were specific and deeply strange. One evening, she was watching a classic World War II movie. A French resistance fighter barked an order at his dog on screen. Assis, the French word for sit. On the rug, Leo, who had been completely ignoring Clara's English commands all week, immediately snapped to attention, his back straight, and sat perfectly still. Clara froze, the remote slipping from her hand. A coincidence. She rewinded the scene. Again the actor said, "Cherchez," search. And Leo, from a sitting position, immediately lowered his head and began sniffing the perimeter of the rug in a systematic sweeping pattern. It was precise. It was disciplined. And it was in French. Where on earth would a stray from rural Colorado learn military-grade commands in French? This discovery was eclipsed by an even more unsettling behavior. Leo seemed to have an intense, visceral reaction to delivery drivers. It wasn't the typical dog barking at the mailman routine. Whenever a UPS or FedEx truck rumbled down her street, Leo wouldn't just bark. He would go into a state of high alert, his body rigid, a low, guttural growl vibrating in his chest. He would place himself between Clara and the door, not in fear, but as a protector, as a guard. This wasn't just a quirk. She began to realize it was a trigger. It was a scar from a past life, a past that was becoming more and more impossible to ignore. We see this in humans who've been through trauma, don't we? A car backfiring sounds like gunfire. A crowded room feels like a threat. We call it PTSD. But what do we call it in an animal who can't tell us what he's seen? We call it a behavioral issue. We label it difficult. But it's not. It's an echo. A memory stored not in words, but in instinct. Driven by a new sense of urgency, Clara called the second chance sanctuary, hoping for any small detail she might have missed. The answer was the same dead end. He was found wandering near the old industrial park east of town, the volunteer explained. No tags, no microchip. We assumed someone just dumped him there. Frustrated, Clara turned to the only place left, the vast, chaotic library of the internet. She started with dogs who understand French commands. The results were predictable articles about specialized breeds, police dogs, military canines, almost all of them elite, highly trained animals like Belgian Malinois or German Shepherds. Not scruffy little terriers. She typed in, "Dog PTSD, delivery uniform." Again, nothing concrete. For days she was adrift in a sea of search results, each one leading to another dead end. Then came the night that changed everything. Following a half-remembered thread about K9 units, she typed in "decorated police dogs" and K9s lost in the line of duty. She scrolled through dozens of heart-wrenching stories of heroism, and then she saw a headline from a news station 3 states away, dated 3 years prior. Tribute to a fallen hero, remembering K9 Officer Evans and his partner Zephyr. She clicked. The story detailed the life and tragic death of a brilliant officer named David Evans and his exceptional Belgian Malinois partner Zephyr. They were a legendary team specializing in explosive detection. The report said they were ambushed during a raid on a warehouse suspected of housing an illegal arms ring. Officer Evans was killed in the firefight. In the chaos, his partner Zephyr, who had been wounded, vanished from the scene. A massive search was conducted, but he was never found. He was presumed to have fled deep into the surrounding wilderness, eventually succumbing to his injuries. Clara felt a wave of sadness. Another hero gone. But then the reporter began listing Zephyr's unique skills. Sourced from an elite training facility in France, the reporter's voice narrated, "Zephyr was unique in that he responded only to commands in French, a security measure to prevent suspects from controlling him." Clara's blood ran cold. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The report continued, showing a slideshow of photos of Officer Evans and his partner. Evans beaming with pride. Zephyr standing stoically by his side. A picture of the team at a community event. And then, a photo from years ago. A younger Officer Evans holding a tiny, scruffy, wiry-haired puppy in his arms. The puppy was a near-perfect twin to the dog currently sleeping on the rug not 10 feet away from her screen. The ears, the patch of white on his chest, the intelligent old soul eyes. It was him. The world around Clara seemed to tilt on its axis. The shy, difficult dog from the shelter. The dog who understood French. The dog who saw a threat in every delivery uniform. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a story. Her simple stray shelter dog wasn't just a stray. He was a decorated hero. A traumatized soldier. A ghost who had somehow, against all odds, survived. The lesson here is one that can shake you to your core. The past is never ever truly dead. It lives on in scars, in memories, and in echoes that ripple into the present. Clara's mission in that instant transformed completely. This was no longer about just caring for a pet. It was about uncovering the truth for a hero who had lost his partner, his purpose, and his voice. The question was no longer who Leo was. She knew who he was. The real question, the one that now burned in her soul, was what really happened to Zephyr on that fatal night, and what dark secret had he been running from ever since? Armed with a theory so wild, it felt like a movie plot. Clara knew she couldn't keep it to herself. Her first move was the logical one. She called the police department in the city where Officer Evans had served. She explained everything. The French commands, the reaction to uniforms, the uncanny resemblance in the photo. The response was exactly what you'd expect. A patient, slightly condescending officer on the other end of the line listened and then gently suggested that grief and loneliness can make people see things, that she'd created a beautiful story for her rescue dog. She was dismissed. Not with malice, but with a patronizing pity that felt even worse. Dejected, but with a stubborn fire lit in her gut, Clara realized the official channels were closed. She needed someone who wouldn't just hear the story, but would understand the language of that world. She went back online this time, digging deeper into the tight-knit communities of law enforcement. She found an obscure online forum for retired K9 handlers, a place filled with grizzled veterans sharing old war stories about their four-legged partners. With trembling hands, she wrote out her entire story, posting the picture of Leo alongside the news photo of the puppy Zephyr. She expected ridicule. Instead, she got silence. For 2 days, her post sat there unread, a testament to her seemingly insane theory, and then a single cryptic private message appeared in her inbox. It read, "Where did you find this dog? My name is Marcus Thorne. I was Dave Evans's partner." Marcus, as it turned out, was a man haunted by a ghost of his own. He was a retired cop living a quiet, reclusive life, shadowed by the heavy weight of guilt. He was supposed to be on that raid with Evans and Zephyr 3 years ago. It was his shift, his call. But his daughter had come down with a sudden raging fever, and he had made the last-minute decision to stay home. A decision that had saved his life and cost his partner his. He carried that what-if with him every single day. He agreed to drive the 3 hours to Silver Creek to meet Clara, making it clear on the phone that he didn't believe her. Not really, but he owed it to Dave Evans's memory to put any false hope, no matter how remote, to rest. The meeting in Clara's small living room was thick with tension. Marcus walked in a man whose exhaustion seemed etched into his face and looked at the scruffy dog on the floor. There was no flash of recognition, just a sad, weary shake of the head. He's the right breed mix, maybe, Marcus conceded, but Zephyr was one of a kind. But then he knelt down. He looked Leo Zephyr in the eyes, and in a low, firm voice, he spoke a single French word. A command that was never in the training manuals, a word that only he and Evans used with the dog. It was their private code. The reaction was instantaneous. Leo, who had been calm and reserved, shot up as if struck by lightning. His ears perked. His tail gave a single tentative thump against the floor. His eyes, which had been distant, were now locked on Marcus with an intensity that was breathtaking. All the doubt on Marcus Thorne's face vanished, replaced by a wave of stunned, heart-wrenching recognition. Tears welled in the veteran cop's eyes. "My God," he whispered. "Zeph, it's you." That moment changed everything. It was no longer Clara's wild theory. It was their shared reality. As the two of them sat and talked for hours, Marcus confirmed what he had always suspected in his gut. The official story of the raid never sat right with him. It was too clean, too simple. Why was a top-tier team like Evans and Zephyr sent to raid a massive arms trafficking warehouse with a skeleton crew for backup? Why was that backup mysteriously reassigned to a minor traffic incident across town just minutes before the raid went down? He'd been told it was a tragic, unlucky coincidence. Now he knew it was a lie. Together, they started piecing together the clues provided by the dog himself. Zephyr's intense protective aggression towards delivery uniforms suddenly clicked into place for Marcus. "The ambushers," he said, his voice low. The report said Evans was surprised. How do you surprise a man with a dog like Zephyr? You come disguised. You come looking like someone who's supposed to be there. The people who killed Officer Evans hadn't been common criminals lying in wait. They had been professionals who walked right up to him in disguise. This is a story about how shared grief can forge the most powerful alliances. A lonely graphic designer, a guilt-ridden ex-cop, and a traumatized dog, 3 broken souls united by a single burning mission. The lesson is painfully clear. Justice doesn't have an expiration date, and true partnership can be built from the wreckage of the past. They looked at the quiet dog, who was now resting his head on Marcus's knee, and they understood. Zephyr wasn't just a victim who had survived. He was the only living witness to his partner's murder. And their next step was terrifyingly obvious. They had to go back to the beginning. They had to let the witness lead the way. The 3-hour drive back to the city where Officer Evans died was a silent one. It was a pilgrimage into a haunted past, and all 3 of them felt it. Clara drove her knuckles white on the steering wheel, a graphic designer who had suddenly become the getaway driver in a real-life cold case. Marcus sat in the passenger seat, his face a grim mask, a retired cop willingly stepping back into the line of fire. And in the back, Zephyr wasn't a pet anymore. He wasn't Leo. With every mile that brought them closer to his old life, he became more alert, more rigid. He wasn't just along for the ride. He was leading them home. The industrial park was a graveyard of ambition. Rusted chain-link fences, crumbling brick facades, and shattered windows stared back at them like hollow eye sockets. The warehouse where Evans had died stood at the far end of a deserted street, a hulking, silent monument to a violent night. It was cordoned off with faded, tattered yellow tape, a warning that was years old. As they got out of the car, the change in Zephyr was profound. The air, thick with the smell of rust and decay, seemed to trigger something deep within him. He began to whine, a low, mournful sound, his body trembling. But it wasn't a tremble of fear. It was anticipation. It was memory. He was back on the job. "Okay, Zeph," Marcus said, his voice barely a whisper as he unclipped the leash. "Okay, partner, show us. Churche." And with that one word, the dog became a different creature. He ignored the main entrance to the warehouse, the place where the official investigation would have focused. Instead, he led them around the side, through a thicket of overgrown weeds and thorns, to a rusted-out service door that was barely hanging on its hinges. This wasn't the path of a police raid. This was the path of an ambush. Inside the warehouse was a cavern of shadows and dust motes, dancing in the slivers of light from the broken ceiling. Zephyr moved with a purpose that was chilling to watch. He swept the area methodically, his nose to the ground, ignoring debris and trash. He was reenacting the last moments of his life with his partner, following a scent trail that for him was as fresh as if it were laid down yesterday. This is the incredible, almost supernatural power of an animal's senses. While we see a crime scene and analyze evidence, they experience a ghost. They can smell the memory of fear, of adrenaline, of a specific person who was never supposed to be there. He led them past the chalk outline, now barely visible on the grimy concrete where Officer Evans had fallen. He didn't even pause. He was tracking something else. He moved towards a collapsed stack of wooden pallets in the far corner of the warehouse, a spot that looked like nothing more than a pile of forgotten junk. And then he began to dig. Not with casual interest, but with a frantic, desperate energy. He clawed at the dirt and debris beneath the pallets, whining with an intensity that made the hair on Clara's arms stand up. Marcus rushed over, pulling away the splintered wood. "What is it, boy? What did you find?" Beneath the rubble, half buried in the hardened dirt, was something small and metallic. Clara knelt down, using her car key to gently pry it from the earth. It wasn't a shell casing. It wasn't a weapon. It was a single ornate silver cufflink shaped like a miniature eagle's head. It was expensive custom, not the kind of thing a typical street criminal would wear. Marcus took it from her, his hand shaking slightly as he wiped the dirt away. He stared at it, and all the color drained from his face. His breath hitched. "Marcus, what is it?" Clara asked, her voice tense. He didn't answer for a long moment. He just kept turning the small silver eagle over and over in his palm. Finally, he looked up at her, and his eyes were filled with a horror that went beyond the grief he already carried. "I know this cufflink," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "I gave a matching set to my captain, a retirement gift, 2 years before the raid." The weight of that sentence hung in the dusty air, heavy and suffocating. The captain. The man who had organized the raid. The man who had at the last minute inexplicably pulled their backup away, leaving Evans and Zephyr exposed and alone. The man who had personally assured Marcus it was just a tragic, unavoidable accident. The truth that hit them in that moment was colder and more terrifying than any ghost. The most dangerous lies aren't the ones told by your enemies. They are the ones whispered by the people you trust. The betrayal hadn't come from the criminals in the warehouse. It had come from within their own house. Zephyr hadn't just been running from the memory of a firefight. He had been running from the scent of a traitor. They were no longer just solving a 3-year-old murder. They had just stumbled into an active, high-level conspiracy. The cufflink in Marcus's hand wasn't just a clue. It was a declaration of war against a powerful man who had already killed once to protect his secrets and would undoubtedly do so again. And now he knew they were coming. The ghost had finally shown them the killer's face. The question was, how do you possibly prove a crime when the man you're accusing is the one who holds all the power? The drive back to Silver Creek was heavy with the weight of the truth. The silver cufflink sat in the car's cup holder, a small object that represented an enormous betrayal. They were holding a lit stick of dynamite, and they knew it. Going to the police was impossible. The captain they needed to expose was the very man who would control the investigation. He would bury the evidence, discredit them, and make the cufflink disappear. They had only one card left to play, the only piece of evidence that couldn't be buried or silenced, the living witness Zephyr. Marcus, drawing on years of police instinct, devised a plan that was both simple and incredibly risky. "We can't force a confession," he explained, his voice low and determined. "But we can force a reaction. We need a witness, but not a human one. We need a camera. And we need to get him in the same room as the dog in a place he can't control. The opportunity came a week later, in the most public of settings, the annual Police Memorial Day ceremony held in a large open park. It was an event the captain, a pillar of the community, would be obligated to attend. It was the perfect stage. On the day of the ceremony, Clara felt a fear so intense it was nauseating. She was just a civilian about to confront a powerful, corrupt official. She threaded a tiny pinhole camera, the kind used by investigative journalists, into the lapel of her jacket, linking it to her phone, which was recording from her pocket. Marcus stood beside her, looking older, more tired, but with a straightness in his spine she hadn't seen before. Between them sat Zephyr, quiet and observant. He could feel the tension, the air thick with unspoken purpose. They waited. They saw the captain arrive, shaking hands, smiling for the cameras, a portrait of civic duty. He worked the crowd slowly, making his way towards their section of the park. As he drew closer, Marcus put a hand on Zephyr's back. The dog, sensing the shift, tensed. The captain finally approached them, his gaze initially sweeping past them without interest. Marcus stepped forward slightly. "Captain," he said, his voice steady. "It's been a long time." The captain stopped, his practiced smile faltering for just a second as he recognized his former officer. "Marcus?" "I heard you'd retired. Good to see you." His eyes flickered down, noticing the scruffy terrier at Marcus's feet. And then he froze. It was a fraction of a second, but on Clara's phone screen, it was an eternity. The captain's eyes locked onto Zephyr. The dog in turn didn't bark or growl. He did something far more damning. He let out a low, terrified whimper and scrambled backwards, trying to hide behind Clara's legs, his body trembling uncontrollably. It was the exact specific traumatized reaction he had to the delivery uniforms. It was the echo of the ambush. The captain's mask of composure shattered. A flicker of pure, unadulterated panic flashed in his eyes. He saw not just a dog, but a ghost. The only loose end from a crime he thought he had buried 3 years ago. "What is this?" the captain hissed, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper, his public-facing smile gone. "What have you done?" "He remembered you," Marcus said, his voice cold as ice. He never forgot the scent of his partner's killer. In that moment, the captain made his final fatal mistake. Forgetting the crowd, forgetting the ceremony, he took an aggressive step towards them. "You have no idea what you're messing with," he snarled. But it was too late. Several other officers nearby, drawn by the confrontation, had seen the whole exchange. They saw their decorated captain lose his composure. More importantly, they saw the raw, undeniable terror in a dog that was known to be a hero. An animal's instinct, pure and incorruptible, had testified in a way no human ever could. The rest happened quickly. The video from Clara's camera, combined with the testimony of the other officers, was enough to force Internal Affairs to open an investigation they could no longer ignore. The captain's carefully constructed world crumbled. Faced with the evidence of the cufflink and the damning video of his reaction, he confessed. He had been deep in debt to the arms traffickers. Officer Evans, a brilliant and incorruptible cop, had gotten too close to the truth. The ambush was meant to silence him forever. The captain never counted on one thing, the survival and unwavering loyalty of his partner. In the end, justice was served, but the true victory was quieter. It was in the peaceful sigh of a dog, now truly Leo, sleeping soundly at the foot of Clara's bed, no longer haunted by the ghosts in uniform. It was in the lifting of a terrible weight from Marcus Thorne's shoulders, his partner's memory finally honored. And it was in Clara, who discovered a strength she never knew she possessed. The lesson we walk away with is this: heroism has many faces. There is the bravery of a soldier like Zephyr, who faces danger for his partner. There is the courage of an ordinary person like Clara, who refuses to let the truth die. And there is the quiet heroism of offering a safe harbor to a wounded soul, allowing them the space to heal. The past may leave echoes, but with love and courage, we can choose which ones we allow to define our future. The story of Zephyr now. Leo is a powerful reminder that the animals we share our lives with have deep, complex histories we may never fully understand. Their quirks, their fears, Their unexplainable behaviors are often just echoes of a past they can't tell us about. So we want to ask you, what's your rescue story? What are the little mysteries about your pet that you've come to love? Share your stories in the comments below. Let's fill this space with the incredible journeys of these resilient animals. And if this story moved you, please give this video a like. It helps us reach more people who need to hear these messages. Subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story of survival courage and the unbreakable bond between us and the animals we love. Every animal has a story. Thank you for letting us share this one.